Please, you can start.
I'm going to share my screen. I'm sure I can see my screen, but I think I still need to use the slideshow. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is James Chukwu. Income Dev Center, infrastructure / DevOps engineer. So this morning I actually be talking on introduction to Windows Server. That's exactly what we'll be talking on this morning. Introduction to Windows Server. I'm sure some of us have come across Windows Server, the word Windows Server. Some of us are already used to it. Some of us are not used to it. Some of us may be hearing it for the first time, like I said. Some of us are already used to it. Some of us know quite a lot about it. However, for some of us that already know about it, we're just going to be refreshing our memories on that. For some of us that don't know anything about it, I'm sure we're going to be learning new things. And for some of us that may know one or two things about it, but do not know much about it, I'm sure not only are we going to refresh our memories, but we'll also get to learn a lot more better. So we'll be looking at introduction to Windows Server, server roles and features, update and patch management, users and group management, backup and recovery, then troubleshooting common issues. So those are the things that we'll be looking at basically. So what is a Windows Server? We're starting with what is a Windows Server. Now, before we talk about the definition of Windows Server, I just want to make a very distinct thing here that Windows Server. Now, okay, let me read this definition, then I'll go ahead and explain what I want to explain. A Windows Server is a specialized operating system developed by Microsoft specifically for servers, unlike the Windows OS you might be familiar with on your home PC. Windows, okay, that's on your home PC. Then these are things that Windows Server is designed for. But let me read the definition again. Then I'll split the definition into two in the course of my explanation. The Windows Server is a specialized operating system developed by Microsoft specifically for what, or specifically for who? Specifically for servers, unlike the Windows OS you might be familiar with on your home PC. Now I'm going to pick two things out of this definition. One, your Windows Server, right? Two, your Windows OS. Now sometimes people can actually mistake these two for each other, or we even use them interchangeably. However, the Windows Server is absolutely different from a Windows OS. Windows Server is what is different from a Windows OS. Now let me just explain the difference between these two guys. Now we've already seen here that Windows Server is what? Windows Server is actually a specialized operating system that is designed, developed specifically for servers. Now, how about Windows OS? Windows OS is also a product from Microsoft, let's not forget. But the thing is this, Windows OS is actually designed for personal computers. Windows OS is designed for mobile devices. Windows OS is designed for or developed for mobile devices, laptops, personal computers, right? It has its own user interface. software applications and hardware management as well. So distinct difference between Windows OS and Windows Server. Let's not forget again. Windows Server is designed for what? It's designed specifically for servers, not just servers, data centers, cloud infrastructure. Windows Server is designed specifically for servers, data centers, cloud infrastructures, etc. However, Windows OS is designed specifically for your laptops, for your computers, for your mobile devices. Now, examples of Windows Server, we're talking about Windows Server 2019, Windows Server 2022, Windows Server 2016. Now, but the examples of Windows OS, we're talking about Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 7, right? So now that is me trying to make us understand the difference between these two guys, so that just for people who do not know or people who may not really know, so that you don't use them interchangeably. There's a difference between Windows Server and Windows, right? So yeah, that's just it. Windows Server designed specifically for servers, data centers, cloud infrastructure. Then Windows OS developed specifically for your laptops, your mobile devices, and your personal computers. Now, Windows servers is designed for high performance and scalability, centralized management, reliability and uptime, file sharing and storage. Now, what is a Windows server used for? We are able to establish what the difference between a Windows server, or rather, we have been able to understand the definition of a Windows server, right? Then we will also be able to establish the difference between the Windows Server and the Windows OS, so that we don't use them interchangeably, right? Now, we need to also understand what exactly is the Windows Server used for, because if you know that it is developed for servers, data centers, specifically for servers, specifically for data centers, specifically for cloud infrastructure, for example. Now, then what is a Windows Server used for? Now, Windows Server is used for file and print server, web server, application server, database server, security and management tools, network infrastructure services. Now, these are the things that Windows Server is used for, right? These are things that Windows Server is actually used for. So, I'm able to highlight what they are used for. So, but then I would just talk on a few things on what this Windows Server is used for. Since we have said that Windows Server is used for file and print server, web server, application server, database server, security and management tools, etc. However, I'll just pick on one or two of these servers and I'll talk about them, so that we can link them to each other and also have a better understanding of them, right? So let me talk on web server. Now, we've been able to understand what a Windows server is. We've been able to understand what a Windows OS is. Also, we've been able to understand the difference between the both of them. We've been able to also highlight what the Windows server is used for. Now, one of the things I would say Windows server is used for is a web server, right? The same is used for a web server. Now, what then is web server? Because I could listen in just like every other person is listening in, and I hear that a Windows server is used for web server. Now, but I don't even know what the web server is. So if I don't even know what the web server is, it becomes a little bit difficult for me to be able to link, link that definition or link that statement, with each other. So that's the reason why I'm looking at what a web server is. What then is the web server? The web server on its own is more like it's a software application, right, that hosts and serves websites. It's a software application that hosts and serve websites, serve web applications over the internet, right? So that's what a web server is. A software application on its own, or a hardware that does what? That hosts and serve websites, hosts and serve web applications over the internet, right? So that is just what a web server is. So I'm also going to be considering time as well. This is 9:20, so I'm not going to spend the whole day just on this particular slide. So I'll just talk a little on them, then I move ahead, talk a little on them, and I move ahead. So I've already explained what a web server is to us, that a web server is a software application on its own, or a hardware device, right, that hosts and serve web applications, websites over the internet, right? So that is basically what a web server is. Now, then application server. Application server is equally a software, software framework on its own, that provides software framework on its own that provides tools, that could help you develop, deploy, manage web applications, right? That's what an application server is. It's a software framework on its own, that could help us to be able to manage, web applications, help us to be able to deploy web applications, help us to be able to develop web applications, right, and services. So that is basically what an application server is. So that's what an application server is. So application server also could also stand as an intermediary between, your database as well as your database and your application itself. So that's what an application server is. It's a framework on its own, software framework on its own, that helps in managing your web applications as well. So that is what an application server is all about. Then let me just talk a bit on the database server before I move to the next slide. Now, a database server on its own also is actually, it's also a software application on its own, that also gives you access, to database, right? So that's database server, software application on its own, or a hardware device also that helps us to be able to manage your database. And I'm sure we know that most times, I'm sure we already know that database is actually a collection of organized data. So having a collection of our data organized, that's what the database is actually all about. So that database server is also a software application or a hardware device that helps us to be able to manage, gives us access to our database, helps us to manage our database as well. Right? So that is database server. So if I move to the next slide, I think we have security and management tools. And then security and management tools, I think best way I can summarize security and management to, security tools are tools that actually help you to be able to detect threats, help you to be able to respond to threats. I'm sure all of us here, we on our phones, on our computers, we've got antivirus installed in our computers. We have antivirus installed. Some of us have antivirus installed in our phone. What exactly is the antivirus doing? The antivirus is actually doing what? It's also helping us to do what? To detect threats, external threats to our phone, external threats to our personal computers, detecting and responding to these threats. That's just a summary of what security tool is all about. Right. So security tool, then management tool, management tool, you could classify management tool as tools or software applications that help you to be able to manage, your resources, monitor your resources. Just for instance, some of us that knows about Prometheus, what we use Prometheus to do? We use Prometheus to be able to monitor, most in some cases our applications, monitor how our application is performing, and then track how these applications are performing as well. And if there are issues, then we need to know. So management tools is just your own software application that helps you to be able to do what? To manage your resources, monitor the performances of your resources. It could be your infrastructure, it could be your application. So let's move on to the next slide. Now, server futures, we're talking about server futures, we're talking about server roles. I think I'll just read this out, then explain a bit of one or two things on them. Now, server features. .NET framework supports running and developing .NET applications, right? Now, Windows Server Update Services manages what Windows Server Update Services. Now, we're talking about the features of the server, right? This is what this is talking about, the features of the server. Then we'll also talk about the role of the servers. So part of the features of the server, one, .NET framework. What does it do? Support and developing .NET applications. The Windows Server Update Services. What does it do? Manage the distribution of updates released by Microsoft. I'm sure of course we usually get updates, from Microsoft from time to time. So Windows Server Update Services, and then Windows Server Update Services. Then remote server administration tools. Now these tools have actually what? Remote server management. Then Windows deployment services tools for deploying Windows operating system. The SNMP service, enables your simple network management protocol for network monitoring. Then your BitLocker drive encryption encrypts drive for enhanced security. That's for server features. And let me just also talk about the server roles. Now, server role Active Directory. So out of this. So anybody who is actually seeing the screen and can be of a help of how I can move this out of this should also help with this. Server roles, Active Directory domain service, the domain system, file storage services, then web server, then remote desktop service, network policy, and access server. How do I move this out? Okay, now server rules, Active Directory and domain service, centralized identity and access management. Then I'm reading out the server rules now. The domain name system server that resolves domain name to IP address. Then file and storage services manages, that's for managing your file and data services. Then web server. Now we're talking about server rules, host websites and web applications. Then remote desktop service enable users to access desktop and applications remotely. The network policy and access services manages network access and policies. Okay, right now, then let me just talk on a few things. Now, talking about the server roles, part of what we're looking at here was we've seen something like domain name system server, resolving domain name towards to IP address. But meanwhile, while at that, let me also say this. Now, when we talk about server role, we're talking about the roles that the server provides to a client, the role that or the specific kind of functions that the server provides to clients and other servers on the network. That's what we mean by server roles. When we say server roles, we talk about what the functions, some specific set of functions, right, that the server provides to a client or other servers on a network. That's what we mean by server roles, right? So, and then one of them that we talked about here now is domain name system, that resolving your domain name to IP address. I'm sure what that means is simply, let me take for instance, bbc.com is actually a domain name, right? Now, you all know that it's going to be a lot more easier for me to remember the domain name, which is bbc.com, as against the IP address. It will be always very easier for me to remember that. So, and then also, I'm sure we have a lot of computer science students here who understands, who knows already that your computer understands the IP address very well, much more than even your domain name. But I, as a person, I understand the domain name and I can remember the domain name easier than the IP address. So how many IP address am I going to have upstairs? But when it comes to domain name, it's a lot more easier for me to remember the domain name. So part of the server rules, one of the rules, of the server is to do what? Is to resolve your domain name to an IP address, right? So I, as a person, can understand the domain name. I can read the domain name. I can have it upstairs, right? But the computer has its business with the IP address, looking at the IP address and, returning whatever request it is. So, but let's not forget, part of the rule, when we talk about server rules, we just talked about functions, some specific functions that the server is, rendering or is providing to clients and providing to other servers on the network. So I've talked about the domain name system, resolving domain name to IP address. Part of the server rules, file and storage services. When we're talking about file and storage services, we've talked about managing and sharing of files and data services. So yes, managing of file and sharing of data services. Then web server, part of the rules of It's part of the server rules, web server, hosting website and application. I think I've talked about web server already. Part of them is also your firewall servers as well, securing your network traffic, ensuring security policies as well. So those are part of the things that server rule is all about. Let me move ahead. So update and patch management. Essential for security, stability, and performance. Security patches protect against threats, stability, and performance improvement comes with updates. I think I said something briefly in this regard initially. And what I said was that for some of us, we already have a lot of them. We have antivirus installed in our PC, we have antivirus installed on our phones, and we also have some form of security measures as well put in place. Of one of them, which is what Microsoft does from time to time as well. There seem to be a lot of Windows updates, and I'm sure we know that the Windows update that comes from time to time is not just doesn't just come, for the sake of coming. They don't release those updates just for us to see them, and look at them. Those updates are not released for us to just have an idea of what it is. They are actually doing a particular purpose, right? And one of those purposes is to ensure security, and is to ensure performance, performance, optimize performance from time to time. Now, even all of us that uses our phones, from time to time we get updates, right? We get updates. When we get updates, what do? We update those applications. When we update those applications, we update them for what? For optimal performance, as well as enhanced security measures that has been included in those updates, right? So that is one of those things that it does. So it is essential for security, stability, and performance. So security patches protect against threat, stability, and performance. Now, Windows updates schedule maintenance during non-business hours. Yeah, scheduling maintenance during non-business hours is very perfect. Why? Because if you're scheduling maintenance during business hour, that could disrupt, your workflow. It could disrupt your work activity. It could disrupt whatever it is you're doing at that particular time, and that would lead to some kind of a downtime. So then include security, critical update, and service packs. I think I already talked about that. Enable automatic updates for what? Prompt installations. Then patch management. Validate updates in test environment. Prioritize update based on criticality. Regular audits to identify missing updates. Yeah, fantastic. Prioritize update based on criticality. Let me just give an example. Let me use a phone as an example. Sometimes when there's a need for me to update all the application on my phone, sometimes I don't do all of that. I don't update all of them. I update them sometimes based on how critical they are, or update them based on, I look at some of the applications I know that I need very urgently. I need them often. I use them quite often, and they are more critical to my day-to-day usage of my phone, day-to-day running of my business or whatever it is I'm doing. So I update them. So prioritize your update based on criticality. The regular audits to identify missing updates. The users and group, um, user creation and permission. Um, Admins create and delete user accounts, assign specific permission. When we talk about what's it called? Creation, user creation and permission. I'm sure we know already that, for instance, you join Binko. One of the things you are entitled to is an email, is an official email, right? Now, so somebody does that, somebody creates an official email. The admin does what? Admin creates an official email for you, which it is meant to use for official interactions. So now that's also user creation and permission. Also, if you're joining an organization newly, for instance, let's assume you're not working remotely, you're working on site. One of the things that happens is this. You're giving let's assume, okay, let's take for instance, you're being given a PC, your official PC to use. One of the things that happens is that the admin creates some kind of a user account for you, right? And not just only that, admin also grants permission as well. Because why? Now there's what they call a role-based access permission. If I'm role-based access control, and that's what exactly does that do? What that does is that for your role that you're occupying in your organization, you have some certain level of permission, that you can operate within, that you have permission to do some certain things. You have permission to do, just like even currently in Gincom, I'm sure we all know some of us, that have user accounts on some servers, you don't even have a sudo privilege. Why? Because based on your role currently in the organization, on that server, you don't need a sudo privilege. Now, that's example of access permission. So you don't need a sudo privilege. So if you rise to a particular level where you need to work with there's some certain kind of level of work you need to do that would need a sudo privilege. Obviously, you'll be granted that access, granted that permission to be able to do that. So now that's for user creation and permission, password policies, implement strong password policies, include complexity rules and expiration period. I'm sure we know about that. Then group management, create groups for simplified user management, add users to groups based on roles. Already talk about role-based access and control. Periodically review and update user permission. Assign permission based on job responsibilities. Now, I've talked about assigning permission based on job responsibilities. I already talked about that. Now, let me just spare a minute to talk about periodically reviewing and update user permission. Now, let me talk on this just for a minute. Now, if I occupy a role in an organization, right, and just like I already said, I have access, I have permissions to work at a certain level. Now, take for instance, if whoever I am reporting to, for instance, is not available, is not on ground, or maybe it's not around for a week or two, for some reasons, and I'm asked to work in that capacity for that 2 weeks. Now, what do you think happens? One of the things that will happen is that my permissions, my role as for that 2 weeks and moved up. What exactly should happen? My permission, access, and the permission to some certain things should be able to move on so that I can work in that capacity for that 2 weeks. Now, if after 2 weeks my boss returns back and takes over his position back, and I return back to my position, right? What happens? Admin is meant to do what? Come back and review it, just to be sure that I don't have permissions to do that particular permission I had for that 2 weeks when my boss wasn't around. So I'm not supposed to still have those permissions, because if I have those permissions, that would not be nice, and that would negate a lot of company policy. So admin is expected to do or review it and take those permissions off me, because I've returned back to my particular role, which does not require me having those permissions. So that's one of the reasons why you periodically review and update user permission. Now, examples of Windows Server. Windows Web Server refers to running the window operation and equipped with software designed to host and serve websites and web applications. So here are examples of Windows Web Server: Internet Information Services, Apache Tomcat on Windows, Microsoft SharePoint Server, Microsoft Exchange Server. Now, these are examples of Windows web servers. Don't forget, we've already talked about what a web server is. Now, but this is us looking at examples of Windows web server. We've seen Internet Information Services. What exactly is Internet Information Services? Developed by Microsoft. It's also a widely used web server software for Windows server. Now, Internet Information Services, which we have been able to establish as developed by Microsoft, right, is also used to host and manage websites, web applications as well over the internet. So that's Internet Information Services. It's also its own web server software, right, which is for Windows servers, but also is used to host or manage websites, used to host and manage web applications, right, over the internet. That's what the Internet Information Services is all about. Then Apache Tomcat on Windows can be installed and run on Windows servers to host Java-based applications. That is one of the examples of Windows web server. Apache Tomcat on Windows does what? It can be installed and it runs on Windows Server to host what? Java-based application. Let's not forget the keyword here that Apache Tomcat, right, is that it also hosts web applications. However, web applications, especially those ones built with Java Java technologies, especially those ones that are built with Java technologies. So when we say they run on Windows servers, let's not forget they are also hosting web applications. However, specifically web applications that are running on Java technologies. A Microsoft SharePoint Server. Microsoft SharePoint Server is a web-based collaboration platform that does what? That also functions as a web server. Microsoft SharePoint Server is also a web collaboration platform. Web collaboration platform, helps us to be able to collaborate for information sharing, knowledge sharing, across an organization. It enables us to be able to collaborate in an organization, to be able to share files, manage projects, share information as well. Then when we talk about Microsoft Exchange Server serves as an email server, but also includes server functionality for Outlook web access. So Microsoft Exchange Server does what? Basically an email server, right? But also have a function of web, you also have its own web server functionality. However, it is tailored for email server. So difference between the Microsoft SharePoint server is that it's also a web-based collaboration, it's also a platform that helps us to be able to collaborate, to share information, share knowledge, share files across the organizations, and it can enable us to collaborate. However, the Microsoft Exchange server does what? It's an email server, right? But also have the web server functionalities. Now, IIS, I think I've talked about this, but this is just an overview. Internet Information Services is a Microsoft web server software designed for hosting web applications and applications on Windows Server. It supports web protocols, offers robust security, and is scalable for diverse web-related tasks. The difference from Windows Server, that's the difference from Windows Server. Then the Internet Information Services, the specific group within Windows Server, focusing on web hosting with its dedicated management console. However, Windows Server, the broader operating system, encompasses various roles beyond just web hosting, providing a comprehensive range of services. Internet Information Services is tailored for a web-focused scenario, simplifying web-related configuration. Server manages diverse function. Okay, this is just talking about the importance of backup in a minute. The time is up already, just in a minute. Then importance of regular backup. Regular backup are crucial for data protection, preventing potential loss due to accidental deletion, hardware failures, or unforeseen events. By creating consistent copies of critical data, organizations ensure reliance against data vulnerability. So I'm sure we all understand the reason why you must have regular backups. And part of them is for why? Data protection. There will always be cases where you could have, accidental deletion. Sometimes, deleting files mistakenly, and then sometimes you will have some kind of potential loss, some which might not be preventable in some cases, in some instances. But having regular backups help you to be able to do what? Have copies of these particular data just in case, there are vulnerabilities. And strategies for recovery, full system restore, incremental recovery, differential recovery, points in time recovery. I think I have to pause because of our time. I think, but we don't have much things again except for troubleshooting issues.
Thank you so much for the very wonderful presentation. And thank you everyone for joining. So perhaps maybe let's say tomorrow we can finish up. That is if we have more time tomorrow. Thank you everyone for joining.
Tomorrow. Could just slot me in so that I could finish.
All right, no problem. Please do have a productive day, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much.